people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
I think that's Natasha's story to tell one day, and she will do, but the conduct and the behaviour and the way Natasha was treated before, during and after, that's a very sore point for Natasha, so that won't.
I don't know what the plan is for Natasha Jonas. I don't know what it is.
Nope.
She's not fighting Clarissa Shields, that much we know.
Nope.
She wanted, according to Clarissa, the kind of money for that fight that you could retire on. And she seems to have no intention of fighting Terry Harper.
I don't know what the plan is.
Some vendetta, some grudge she is still holding over her treatment ahead of the Terry Harper fight well over a year ago, 2, maybe 3. They're the only 2 champions at this weight, and to many, it's the only fight that makes sense. It's not about to happen. If I had to guess, I believe that Natasha Jonas is in fact courting retirement. She has a commentator job on Sky. She doesn't need to keep fighting. She doesn't actually need to keep boxing. She's financially stable.
She's a unified champion.
Her finances intact. She can retire on that, and I believe that she means to this year. I think this could very well be Natasha Jonas's last year in the sport of boxing, because if you're not fighting Clarissa and you're not fighting Terry, you're not getting any younger.
There aren't that many big fights to go around, anywhere in between 147 and 154. Not right now.
And perhaps not for some months, perhaps not for the entirety of this year. Yeah, I get the sense Natasha's thinking about hanging them up, and hanging them up very soon.
You look across the landscape at 154 pounds. The fight is in the top 10.
Natasha Jonas is ranked at number 1. Former undisputed welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus, she's ranked at number 2, but she's fighting Terry.
On the undercard of Taylor versus Cameron.
So maybe Natasha Jonas is set to share the ring with former champion Femke Hermans. Femke has a fight date booked for sometime in June against an opponent that has yet to be announced. Maybe it's Natasha.
Maybe.
And maybe that is a solid fight. Maybe it is. Natasha Jonas versus a former champion and Femke Hermans, who's coming off a big win over Mary Spencer. Maybe that's a good fight. It is a good fight, but it's not a big fight.
The Mary Spencer fight wouldn't be a big fight either. Not that it matters, because Mary Spencer's got a fight date booked herself for early June.
They have effectively rescheduled the Adriana De Los Santos fight, the fight that was supposed to go down a few weeks ago. A few weeks later, they've rescheduled it for early June.
That takes her out of the running.
Former WBC champion of Sweden, Patricia Bergul. Natasha Jonas already fought her. She already fought Patricia. She already fought Marie-Eve Dicaire, who has since retired.
What about Hannah Rankin?
Former WBA junior middleweight champion Hannah Rankin, she's spoken for. She's supposed to have a fight coming up against Slovenia's Emma Kozin. Hannah is ranked at number 8, whereas Emma is ranked at number 9.
She's booked. She's spoken for. Maybe, just maybe, they can offer Hannah the right money and get her to skip out on Emma, take on Natasha. She was supposed to last year.
She ended up fighting Terry Harper instead in defense of her WBA title, and she lost it. Here today, there's a chance she might fight Natasha Jonas, though even if she does, that's not a big fight either.
It's a good fight. It's a decent fight, but it's not a big fight.
I've had the privilege of speaking to Natasha Jonas on more than one occasion, and she's not too caught up on what people think. She's going to do what's best for her, irrespective of the boo birds and the critics. That's what she's going to do.
She's going to look damn good doing it.
That's why I don't get the sense she'll ever come around to facing Terry Harper for a second time. Only Natasha Jonas and Team Harper know what it is exactly that Natasha Jonas is so hung up on.
Only they know.
But it doesn't look like you can convince Natasha to give Terry Harper the time of day and a crack at the other 3 alphabet titles at this weight. For this, Natasha Jonas has come under heavy fire. A lot of criticism. I myself, being a fan of her, well, I can't justify it.
I mean, I like her, but I can't defend it.
It really can't be defended that this division will not achieve consolidation, that this division will be deprived of the biggest fight that you can hope to make within it.
And there are no alternatives, no substitutes.
Nothing comparable, and Nothing major on the horizon. Unfortunately, it just is what it is, and as stated, I can't defend it.
Not a lot that I can say.
Just have to wait and see what the remainder of the year holds for the junior middleweight division's unified champion, Natasha Jonas. My super middleweight news, former WBC champion Deontay Wilder on Canelo versus Benavidez says, Canelo is too small. That's an easy fight for David.
Towing that company line.
When the journalists, when the pundits ask the fighters these questions, what they're hoping for are professional insights, an angle of the sport that they themselves perhaps don't understand because they themselves aren't the fighters. Whereas the fighters, what they usually do in these situations is just toe the company line.
There's no point in even asking him these questions.
Canelo is too small for him, said Wilder to ES News. That's an easy fight for David, in my opinion.
I suppose that David being a PBC fighter, a Heyman fighter like you're a Heyman fighter, has nothing to do with it.
Deontay Wilder is entitled to his opinion, as you are entitled to yours, and I am entitled to mine.
I don't give a fuck about Wilder's opinion or yours.
Isn't he the guy who said he didn't need skills because he had power? If he had some skills, he wouldn't have got his ass kicked by Tyson Fury the way that he did.
I don't give a fuck what Wilder thinks about that fight.
And I want to preface what I'm about to say with this. I don't give a fuck what you think about this fight either before you type me an essay.
I don't give a fuck what you think about David and why he couldn't knock out Caleb.
I don't give a fuck what you think happens if David does share the ring with Canelo Alvarez. I don't care.
I'm not gathered here today to hear what you think about it. You came here because you want to know what I think.
That's why you're here.
If you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, David is a very limited fighter.
So limited that size, and size alone, may not be enough to secure him the W in a Canelo Alvarez fight, because Canelo Alvarez is quite accustomed.
David is basic.
Do you think a David Benavidez fight would be the first time that Canelo Alvarez faces a taller, longer fighter than himself? He faced a taller, longer fighter than himself in Daniel Jacobs, and Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant.
And Sergey Kovalev.
Canelo Alvarez has faced more fighters with a height advantage and a reach advantage than David has faced fighters like Canelo.
Deontay Wilder couldn't be bothered to mention that, but that's because all Deontay Wilder's going to do if you ask him is toe the company line.
That's all any of those PBC guys do. They're all cut from the same cookie cutter, and they're all just going to toe the company line.
Yeah.
Get their marching orders from Al Heyman to talk each other up like they're the best in show.
Yeah.
It's what they do. David is far too basic a fighter, too basic a puncher for Canelo Alvarez. That's what I see.
He's basic.
I know he might have fooled a few casuals with those shoe shines that he gets off on no-hopers, those consecutive uppercuts that he landed on David Lemieux. What passes for combinations?
Funny that he wasn't able to do that to Caleb Plant.
Funny that as soon as David Benavidez stepped up in competition, the knockouts stopped.
That's not a coincidence.
That Caleb Plant kept spoiling towards the tail end of the match, that he kept holding David Benavidez and tying him up, is what David's supporters like to point to as to why he couldn't knock the guy out.
They're blaming Kenny Bayless, too.
That he didn't do enough to break up the clinches, that he didn't do enough about the holding.
They're blaming Kenny because David couldn't knock out Caleb the same way that Canelo knocked out Caleb.
That's Kenny's fault?
No.
Was Kenny Bayless holding David Benavidez's arms together?
No.
Caleb was. Caleb was the one holding David Benavidez's arms together. Caleb was the one tying him up and holding, and David was short of answers, powerless to stop him.
Couldn't stop him, couldn't drop him, like Canelo stopped him, like Canelo dropped him.
And you'll get the same cookie-cutter answer whenever you bring this up, that for 5 rounds, Caleb Plant's energy reserves were spent, his legs were gone, and all he could resort to was holding. All he could resort to was spoiling. And this went on for 5 rounds because David Benavidez couldn't find the knockout. They want to blame Kenny.
Kenny's not the one holding David's arms together.
In the Gervonta Davis versus Yuriorkis Gamboa fight, where Yuriorkis Gamboa suffered a torn Achilles tendon, he couldn't punch, you know?
Because he was only standing on one good leg. So what he resorted to doing was spoiling.
Just like Caleb Plant was spoiling, holding, tying the other guy up to smother his work. He was doing the same thing, but Gervonta Davis was able to create enough space to score some knockdowns and a subsequent knockout. Gervonta Davis was able to do that. David Benavidez was not.
Because David is more basic even than Gervonta Davis, who I don't have a high opinion of.
These guys going up to bat for David Benavidez and why he couldn't stop Caleb Plant the same way that Canelo did. What they won't tell you is the reason he couldn't stop that guy was because...
The real reason.
He wasn't using his jab to close the distance, to get within striking distance of Caleb Plant. What he was doing was coming forward in a high guard, and as soon as he got close enough to throw a punch...
Coming forward in a high guard like a fucking robot.
See, he wasn't using his jab. And if he had been using his jab to get within striking distance of Caleb Plant,
Caleb would have gloved up, got behind his guard, and allowed David to step forward.
Step into his jab, at which point he'd be within striking distance to throw other punches, throw other shots that perhaps Caleb wouldn't see behind the guard.
That's if he were using his jab to close the distance, but he wasn't. What he was doing was coming forward in a high guard and then trying for big shots, really big shots, as soon as he got there. Shots that were telegraphed, shots Caleb knew were coming.
Sweeping shots that he could effectively get under and or around, then spoil.
He did this for 5 rounds. You got a guy, he's not punching anymore. He's not moving around as much as he was at the beginning of the fight, and he is so obviously tired. And for 5 rounds, David couldn't put him away.
A guy who was so obviously ready to go. David was unable to close the show. Big part of the reason I favor Canelo Alvarez to beat David Benavidez is because of the experience of the fighters and the stylistic matchup. David is far too basic and predictable.
All he has is his size and his engine.
And not much else. David Benavidez is a textbook pressure fighter, a mid-range to inside guy, whereas Canelo Alvarez, he's that balanced boxer puncher.
Moves seamlessly from offense to defense back to offense.
More durable, certainly a more durable fighter with a better chin than a Caleb Plant, who David Benavidez couldn't stop.
More durable fighter, a stronger puncher, a sharper puncher, a counter puncher.
I mean, the difference between a Caleb Plant fight and a Canelo fight for David Benavidez is that with Canelo, you're going to have some stuff coming at you. Stuff that you don't see.
Punches you don't see, short ones.
Between and under your punches, your wide sweeping hooks, sweeping shots. David Benavidez being a mid-range to inside fighter and fighting a fight at that proximity, that actually favors the smaller fighter because the smaller fighter can put punches together faster than the guy with longer arms.
At that range, they can. Think Joshua versus Ruiz 1.
It's the underlying principle, and David Benavidez, not being much of a jabber, not being a long-distance fighter, a long-range puncher, he wants to get close to his opponents. He wants to get close to them to overwhelm them with volume. You do that to Canelo. He's got better head movement, better upper body movement, and better counter-punching.
Certainly better than anything Caleb Plant has to offer, and Caleb, he survived you. He survived you for 12 rounds, 5 of which he wasn't even fighting.
5 of which the man was exhausted, but I'm supposed to believe that you can put away Canelo where you couldn't put away that guy.
Yeah, right.
David Benavidez's punches are wide.
Got all these bozos talking about how great his fucking engine is, how great it is. Well, how great is it going to be when he's getting countered?
Did you think of that? Did you ever think of that, Eddie Futch?
You fucking idiot.
It's not like Canelo Alvarez has to go out there and find the guy the way he has to find and try to pin down a moving target like a Dimitri Bivol with longer legs and longer strides, longer punches to keep the smaller man on the outside. David does the opposite of that. He ain't got to find that guy.
David's going to do half the work for him. He's going to bring the fight to him.
Because his punches are so much wider than Canelo's, and Canelo's punches are so much faster, shorter, and more defensible than David's.
Canelo's tricky. He's a small target, can make himself a small target, a moving target, in the pocket.
I'd pick him to beat David Benavidez, I would. The case of David Benavidez is a case of smoke, mirrors, and window dressing. They want to believe that this guy really is some kind of a monster.
A monster, a real one, would have steamrolled Caleb Plant.
Wouldn't have to argue about Kenny Bayless and what Kenny did or didn't do in the fight if David Benavidez really were a fucking monster. But he's not a monster. He's a basic robotic puncher.
You got that hot shot?
Dimitri's calling me and telling me I want the big unification fights, and I just want to fight one of the unification fights, which right now it's either Beterbiev or Canelo. And the bottom line, I think we're going to get the bottom line by the end of this week, to be honest with you. I'm just hoping that what Canelo has been saying, if that's one option, I'm just hoping that there's any seriousness in that. I mean, I believe that he himself, he's got the character. I mean, he's proven it before in his career. He doesn't want that loss to remain and on his record and on his consciousness. So I believe that he wants it, but I'm just really, really skeptical on whether the rest of the team really wants to fight, because I don't see why they would. Why would they want to fight Bivol again?
It's a legitimate question. It's a fight that can wait. When Lennox Lewis suffered that shock upset loss to Oliver McCall, he didn't fight the guy straight away. Took a couple of fights, 1 or 2 years, before he saw that guy again. Dmitry Bivol, he's in his prime.
He's got time.
The ideal pecking order, as far as I'm concerned, would be Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev for the undisputed light heavyweight championship, and Canelo versus, say, David Benavidez before this year is out. And let the winners of those fights meet up with each other
for what would be the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world.
All signs seem to point to money issues. Per Vadim Kornilov on Beterbiev versus Bivol, we were talking about trying to make the fight this summer, but then the Callum Smith thing happened, and to be honest with you, it didn't seem like there was really the finances that are necessary to make everybody happy.
A few weeks ago, there were preliminary reports. A few weeks ago, before the order from the WBC came down for Artur to face Callum Smith, there were talks of doing Beterbiev versus Bivol in the Middle East, and those talks have since fallen apart.
It's the best fight to make at light heavyweight, make no mistake. That's the only fight to make. Callum Smith.
I don't like his chances against Artur. I don't know how many times now I've said that.
But you know, the silver lining, you know what the silver lining is, the ray of hope, is that if Callum Smith can somehow pull off this miracle, he will be in control of 3 of the 4 major titles in the men's light heavyweight division, and he can then bring those 3 titles to a Dmitry Bivol fight on the matchroom side of things. Now, some people, not that many,
they're giving Callum Smith a fighting chance on the premise of his catch and counter left hook, his catch and shoot left hook, mid-range to inside.
And I personally don't think Callum is going to be ballsy enough, gutsy enough to let his hands go with Artur at that proximity, because Artur is a more heavy-handed puncher than a John Ryder, a more heavy-handed puncher than a Canelo Alvarez. Those two naturally smaller fighters and smaller punchers got a lot of respect from Callum Smith. Now, you might see Callum let go of that catch and counter left hook with a Matthew Bowder leak.
Yeah, with him.
But with Artur, I mean, even the punches you block, even the punches that land on the arms and gloves, you're going to feel the weight of those punches, the power behind them. And feeling that power may elicit a lot of respect from Callum Smith, so much so that maybe he don't want to shoot that catch and counter left hook. Maybe he don't want to mix it up with this guy mid-range to inside.
I think not.
Artur Beterbiev is a pressure fighter, like David Benavidez is a pressure fighter, we just talked about. But Artur Beterbiev is a much craftier pressure fighter than David Benavidez by and large. I mean, that double and triple jab that he shoots, there's a lot of weight behind that. And that's how he's able to get within striking distance of his opponents to hit them with shots they don't see. Shots to the body, under the elbow.
Just under.
Uppercuts up the middle that split the guard, hooks that sail around it. It's all behind the double and triple jab that gets the opponent to glove up, cover up,
keep their guns holstered
while he gets within striking distance. And, once he's there, these guys don't want to be there with him. In the case of Callum Smith, a taller, longer fighter than Artur Beterbiev, albeit a younger fighter.
He's not going to be better in the pocket than that guy because he's got longer arms.
In the pocket, the guy with the shorter arms, thereby the shorter punches, has the advantage. That's Artur.
The shorter, tighter, more compact punches. That's definitely Artur more than Callum.
You can only really give Callum a puncher's chance.